So last, but certainly not least in the segment section, are techniques. And so let's take a look at a couple of techniques that you're going to need to know in order to be more proficient at segmentation. The first you might have learned in some sort of library science class or maybe a computer apps class. These are things called conditions. So you've noticed that we've used some conditions already. Things like greater than, starts with, contains, exactly matches, rejects, or greater than, equal to, etc. The greater than, equal to, I think we have a pretty firm grasp on, but there are these other conditions that might not make as much sense to you, or maybe you didn't know how to use them before. So just to cross my T's and dot my I's, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page with these. And so I just went through some of the drop downs that you'll see when you click on the segment, new segment. Some of those drop downs include exactly matches, contains, starts with, ends with. And so let's tackle those three first. Exactly matches basically means that if you go into that and you type something in the box after exactly matches, it means that that exact word is going to be present. It will ignore everything else except that. So for example, if you type exactly matches apple, it's not going to pull up grapple. It's not going to pull up apple pie. It's not going to pull up red apple. It's only pulling up the word apple, not apples, just apple. Contains, on the other hand, will match anything with the word in it. So in this case, apple, if we type in apple pie, so the word contains apple pie, that will pull up apple, grapple, red apple, green apple. It'll contain, or it will pull up anything with the word apple in it. If you choose starts with or ends with, it works the same way, just one's on the beginning, one's on the end. It will match everything with apple at the beginning if you choose starts with, or apple at the end if you choose ends with. And so if you say it starts with apple, then it's going to pull apple pie. If you say it ends with apple, it will pull red apple. But the begins with apple or starts with apple will not pull red apple because apple comes at the end. If that makes sense. Seems pretty straightforward. Where we really get into kind of the advanced level, this really requires some technical level. So don't feel bad if you don't know how to do this because it's a little bit more complicated. But what rejects does is it matches a regular expression. Okay, and there are many options of how to use this. And I gave you a support document here that if you really want to, you can go look. I also took one of the standard ones. This is something that I might type in. Maybe I'm looking at people who know more specifically what they're looking for. And I want to look at that segment of people. So I want to know people who type in more than 2 words into the keyword search. So I select keywords and then matches, rejects, so the R-E-G-E-X. I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to type in the box this lovely line of code here, or symbols, I should say. And what I did here was break that down for you. What am I asking it to do? And so this means start at the beginning of the line. This means match 0 or more white space characters, so on and so forth. Okay, so you have an idea that you can do this. I also gave you a cheat sheet. If you're looking at finding things that have 1 word, 2 words, 2 or more words, 3 words, 3 or more words, 4 or more words, or maybe I want to just find something that has 2 or 3 words. And you can see based on this as well as this, how to maybe modify this to get what you're looking for. But that is how that works. The next thing that you want to take a look at is the and or. And a lot of people think they know what and or mean, but then when we get into using them for conditions, people lose their mind, I think. So or means it's either 1 or 2. And so you're saying, can you give me 1 or 2? When you say and, you're looking for this section here in the middle. You're not going to get anything in this. You're not going to get anything in this. You're saying, I just want to look at this part right here. Okay? And so when you're doing these things, you want to make sure when you're using conditions, you want to make sure you know what you're really asking the computer to give you. The other thing that you have noticed, and I've been using them, and I think I've mentioned some of them as we were going through, but you need to know the definitions between a user, a visit, or session, and a hit. A user refers to me, one person. A visit is one session on a site. And a hit is a little piece of engagement that happens within a session. And so if we look at this example, and I'm sorry that this got cut off here. I took it from Marketing Motive, as you can see here, because I thought it defined this quite well. So you have these 5 users up here, okay? And so for this guy here, he had 1, 2, 3, 4 different sessions. Let's say this represents a day. So he had 4 sessions on a day, and each time he went in, he had different hits, and so that they're represented by these guys here. So within the session, he did 1, 2, 3, 4 different hits, and these hits could be things like downloading a PDF, signing up for a subscription, purchasing something, etc. So he had 4 different hits within the session, 2 different hits within the session, 1 hit within the session. And you can see that some of them resulted in e-commerce transactions and some of them did not. Okay, so if I were looking at this, right, and so this is why this is important to think about. If I wanted to create an e-commerce segment and I wanted to look at revenue per user that exceeded 125, for example, like the one we did before, the person in that time period, that person placed an order of 125. Okay, and so if I look at this time, let's say that this is a time period represented by this graph. If I said revenue per user was greater than 125 in this this day, let's say, and this represents, this whole screen here represents a day. Okay, and so who would be in and who would be out? Well, green would be in, right? Because 100 plus 62 plus 25 is 100, greater than 125, of course. Orange, though they had a transaction, they're out. Blue is out, right? And gray is out, okay? Because none of these guys, and obviously purple's actually at 0, none of these guys exceeded that 125. Now, what happens if I asked you about revenue per session was greater than 60? So revenue per session that was greater than 60. So we look at this and we say, okay, blue is in because this session was above 60. This session is in because it was above 95. But this session is not. Then with green, we see that we have 2 sessions that are in and 1 session that is not. Okay? And so you want to take a look at these and think through sessions versus hits versus users, and then obviously within a time period. So now what I can do is take a look at a segment that comes from a specific referral source who fits within the criteria of e-commerce. So what does that mean? It means that I go to create a new segment and then I go down to traffic sources. And what I'm going to do is go into Medium and click CPC. Okay, and so you can see that I have 1.27 of users from the site came to the site from CPC. And so then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and click on e-commerce. I'm going to look at revenue. Now, here's where the difference is, right? So if I say greater than $100, see this? These are the users who spent more than $100, regardless of the number of sessions, okay? So they came in and they were in multiple sessions, and together those sessions resulted in $100. And this, how do I track this? This is because cookies are put on their browser, and I can track them over a period of time. Or I say, or I should also say, or because they came in from a link, so we're talking about CPC, but if they came in from an email link that was customized to that particular user, I can track that user. But the other thing I can do is click on per session, and you'll notice that the number should change. So not a lot, but now we're down to 26 users as opposed to, again, the 28. Okay, so we had one person, or excuse me, 2 people come in and purchase multiple times at a value over that equated to over $100. So again, per user is one person spending maybe multiple times. Per session is every time somebody comes on the site, you know, and within that period of time, they spent $100 and that's sitting. Okay, and so you can see how you can use this and how those two change. And while on this site that doesn't change drastically this number, on some sites it can drastically change your value. So you want to be very careful about both of those. Look at some sequences. So you don't necessarily just have to create a segment based on specific behaviors or things that happen. You can actually create them using multiple behaviors over a period of time. And so one of the things that you might want to look at is show me all the people who bounced off my site after they hit a certain page, or show me the people who landed on one page and then immediately following that went back to the home page, or a number of combinations of those kinds of things. So this might be of interest to you as you're thinking through your goals and your business objectives. So the way to do that is go to add segment, new segment, and then under sequences, which is under the advanced box here, sequences, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about let's see, how about a page that contains a stem? Okay, so a user goes to the sign in page. So Google prompts you, and Google's merchandising store, they will prompt you to sign in. And I want to know people who do not transact after they're asked to sign in. Okay, so they don't buy anything supposedly because they were asked to sign in. The way to do that is under step 1 here. I'm going to type in page, and hopefully it will limit the number of, I think I passed it. Yep, there it is. Okay, so I want to say the page contains, I'm going to look at any pages that contain sign in. I don't know why it's asking me to do sign in.html. So any pages that contain sign in. So anytime that they ask me to sign in, I want to see people who don't transact. And so I type that in, and I'm going to go ahead and hit, I want to add a step. Now you have is followed by or is immediately followed by. And I don't care about if it's immediately followed, well, we can do immediately followed by, but immediately followed by, oops, them bouncing. So they land on this page and then they bounce. And so what we find here, we're going to go ahead and call this don't like sign in. Sign in. I'm going to click preview. It will show me how many people, which it usually does preview very nicely over here already, but you can do this to show you the number of people to make sure it's actually a valid thing. And then I'm going to save them. And so this is a segment now that I've created of people who don't like it when they're asked to sign in. And I can go back to acquisition. How did they come to my site? Because that might be interesting. So people weren't expecting to have to sign in. And so we can see here with this that, and again, I'm just looking at an overview of acquisition. Looks like people who don't like to sign in, looking for their biggest group, came from display ads, which again makes sense, right? They want to get information, they don't want to buy anything. The information on the display ad might have been misleading, so I would want to go back to my display ad team, and I would want to talk to them about what they're showing. Are we over-promising and under-delivering? Once again, we can see that our other section is a little high. We're not even going to bother clicking on that right now, but that would be something you'd want to explore with them to make sure that those sites, if we can manage them, could be managed. We can also look at cohorts, so not only just segments but cohorts. So these are groups of subjects who shared a particular event together during a particular time span, and we can track them over extended periods in cohort studies. And so the easiest way to explain that was something that we did before. We looked at the time period changes, but what we can do is we can actually look at 2 different time periods and see maybe how we're performing differently or better in a specific area. Oops, clicked too fast. And so my question to myself might be, what do I do better? CPC or organic? How are they working, or what do I do worse? And so I want to look at 2 different cohorts. So maybe their date of first visit is February 1st to February 29th. So that's the same, but then I want to look at these 2 cohorts, or this cohort, but the changes, CPC, people who came in from CPC or people who came in from organic. So let's look at how to do that. Do is set the date of their first session. And so what I did was go up to add segment, new segment, date of first session, and I'm going to say their first session happened to be between, we'll go all the way back here to February, February 1st and their, so I know I need to add both, and February 29th. Okay. And so it's going to give me all the people who did something during that time period. Okay, so I have 241 users, 712 sessions. So that seems right. And so we're just going to say February start date. And we're going to save it. And so immediately we're going to be able to see how people in February performed against all users. Not necessarily during that time period. And it's so tiny, so tiny. But we can see some, you know, obviously flat trends here, right? But the next thing we talked about doing was CPC or organic. And so we want to take a look at both of those as well. So what I'm going to do is go over here to my acquisition box, click on overview, and what it's going to do is show me all of the data. Then I'm going to go to the primary dimension, and I just want to choose mediums. You can also see that you can look at sources and mediums and sources, but for this case, to answer my question of what do I do better, CPC or organic, I'm going to choose mediums because those are both mediums. And it gives me some fine little looking graphs and some other information. And so I can just use this to, we're not going to dive too deep, but I can look at all users compared to my February start date, and I can see that I underperform compared to all users. I underperform in referrals, but that's not really answering my question, does it? Nope. I want to look just at this graph here. So let me blow that up a little bit for you so you can see it maybe a little bit better. And so I want to look at how do I perform in February only, CPC and organic. And so green is organic, and so I had 41% of organic traffic, and I had a very tiny, let's see, 2.6% of CPC. And so I certainly need to work on this compared to my organic search. Hey, my SEO is working great, but I certainly want to look at CPC because it's very much underperforming. Now I might want to go back and say, well, what's the benchmark? How does this normally perform, not just in February? And this graph down here, I'm just scrolling down, is great for that because I can see that typically I perform at 24, little under 24.5% compared to 16.5%. And so something happened here in February that this dropped below average. And so again, by looking at the cohort, I can see how I'm doing within that month. Maybe I had some big pushes going on for both with CPC, and I wanted to see how it did in February compared to organic. But I can also then take it to the next level and go and look and see, okay, but what about over time? So of all users, over time period, how did we do? And we can see that the average is 24% versus 16%. So not very well. So we've gone through and kind of broken them down into micro elements here, and now what I want to do is have you try this. And so what I want you to do is try to put it all together. Go into the site, and we've done all of these in different chunks, but I want you to go in to the segments, and I want you to create a new segment, and you see the A, B's, and O's. So this is what we really do, right? We look at not just A, not just B, not just O. We look at all three of them potentially together. And so go ahead and try to create a segment. You can name it putting it all together. You can name it whatever you would like. But try to have the continent be America. So we want to look at people from America who are coming into the site through mobile, who are staying on the site longer than 10 seconds, and who are staying on, and this is really high, so or who are looking for keywords who have greater, we'll say, than 2 words, and who have goal completion greater than 1. So go try that and give me some feedback. Let me know how it works. You'll also need to do this for your homework, so I'm sure I'll see the fruits of that labor after that. But this is a good exercise that we'll all do together. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, post them on the frequently asked questions or on the discussion board page, and we can work through it together. Thanks, guys.